Okay, this time we'll be talking very briefly about John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. We have discussed it at length during lessons, so we'll recap a bit some main themes about this novel, and we will look at a couple of extracts and point out some of the main elements. So, to recap main elements, it was written by John Steinbeck and it was published in 1939. Since you have read it, you have noticed that it was a controversial novel because it dealt with themes that went against the common ideas spread in America at the time. So it denounced the evil of capitalism and the racism against migrants who were very heavily affected by the Great Depression and by the dust storms that hit very hard in the Midwestern states of the United States. The tone is epic. It can be part of this very interesting and very large and fluid category of the so-called Great American Novel, because it deals with the idea of a family, with the story of a family through the years and the adventures of this family. So it is epic in tone, but it deals with very humble people. All of the main characters are poor, are migrants, are members of the working class, and there is no main character who comes from a different social class. Even if it was a very controversial novel, it had an enormous success both in the United States and abroad, and it won Steinbeck the Nobel Prize. Steinbeck was awarded with the Nobel Prize for Literature, and it large part of the merit of that is to be given to The Grapes of Wrath. So let's deal with a couple of extracts. The first one, as you can see, is taken from chapter 17. Chapter 17 is one of the chapters which deal with the general themes of the novel. It's not directly related to the adventures of the Joad family, and we have the description of how during their travel from the Midwest to California, families organize themselves along the way. So we see that migration is a situation which unites people from all over the country. Those are people forced to migrate due to the economic conditions, become more or less one single people. It's the situation that all the people were in for the time of their shared route along Route 66 made them one family, one people. And this was so much evident at night, because each night people stopped along the road and they create, as Steinbeck says, a world which was made of the people stopping by, for example, near a source of water, or people who stopped in a place where there was enough space to park the car or the truck that they traveled on, and build a fire to have something to eat. And these worlds, which were impermanent, were created at night and dismantled in the morning. But during this night, the more they went on, the more they were structured and had laws. For example, here you see that each family knew what laws they had to observe, and what they were forbidden what actions they were forbidden to do. And it's very interesting because Steinbeck underlines the fact that there is no higher authority who dictated laws, but families learned by themselves. Society has the capacity to be self-organized. There is not necessarily need for laws and authority. And if you think about it in the novel, authority is the element which represses the spontaneous positive organization of families, of migrant families. So let's move to probably the most famous part of the book, which is in chapter 28, the second to last chapter in the book, and this is the short extract of Tom leaving his mother and saying farewell to her after he kills a deputy during a riot for a strike. He is wanted by the police, so he must leave his family in order to avoid them to suffer because of his condition. So there are two main interesting elements in this extract. The first one is here when he says that maybe all people are part of one big soul. It's something that Preacher Casey, one of the other characters of the book, says in the beginning of the book, and Tom here say he believes that. So the idea is that everyone is part of a larger spiritual body, let's say, which makes everyone equal to the other. And so if Tom leaves his mother, and his mother asks him, where can I find you? He says, you will see me every time you look at, for example, people beaten by the police, or people fighting for their rights, or children who are happy when they eat. So if everybody is part of one big soul, everyone is everywhere, more or less. So we'll see Tom in the eyes of children and so on. And we will see that how, we have seen how this idea is slightly different in works that are inspired by The Grapes of Wrath, because The Grapes of Wrath has a massive legacy in American culture. One of the first things that we can talk about is the 1940 film by John Ford, who is one of the main directors of classic Hollywood. He's the director of some of the most famous Western movies, like Stagecoach and things like that, that was awarded with two Academy Awards, two Oscars, one for Best Direction and one for Best Supporting Character for the actress who played Ma Jode. Here, this part, for example, does not take into account the whole plot of the film. For example, obviously, it does not deal in depth with general chapters. It deals just with the adventures of the Jode family, and it does not include the final scene where Rosa Sharn breastfeeds the old guy, the old man who's starving, because it would probably, it was not probably, it was sure that it would be censored by the screening authorities. Another very important work inspired by The Grapes of Wrath is the record by Woody Guthrie, Dust Bowl Ballads. Here, Woody Guthrie published this record in 1940, and two songs, but they are actually one long ballad, tell the whole story of the Grapes of Wrath. But it makes one important change. If you, I've posted the lyrics to this song in your classroom stream, and you'll notice that it say everybody might be just one big soul. Not everybody is part of one big soul. That's the main difference, and it is very interesting. This difference is very interesting because Woody Guthrie states that it needs work to be part of this one big soul. So it is possible that someone is not part of it. And he's probably thinking about landowners, vigilantes, policemen, and people who who try to oppose the, to oppose migrants in their quest for a better life. The other songs in Dust Bowl Ballads are very interesting because they talk about the more or less the background of the novel, because they describe, for example, the effects of large dust storms on the people, or the idea that California is, yes, it is the sort of promised land, like the Jodes think in the first part of the novel, but it is a promised land only if you have the money to live there. If you don't have the money, you will probably be sent back, or you will be treated very badly by the authorities. Another example of the legacy of the Ghost of Tom Joad is the record, The Ghost of The Grapes of Wrath. Sorry, not The Ghost of Tom Joad. Is the record by Bruce Springsteen, The Ghost of Tom Joad, which alludes to the main character in the novel. In the title itself, the eponymous song talks about Tom Joad as a sort of spirit who shows how the world is going bad, even 55 years after the novel and the film. Many other songs in this record deal with, for example, migrations from Mexico to the United States, and its effect and how these are dealt with during the 90s. Another interesting novel that owes a large debt to the Grapes of Wrath is the novel by T. Corages and Boyle, The Tortilla Curtain, which deals with migration from Mexico. It is, if you notice, from the same years. It was published in the same years as The Ghost of Tom Joad, and it deals with more or less the same theme. And it shows how a liberal man who works for an environmentalist newspaper becomes obsessed by Mexican immigrants, and ends up being a racist. And in the end, the final scene is more or less a borrowing from The Grapes of Wrath. It deals with a flood, just like the novel by Steinbeck, and it's more or less the same scene. So we can see how The Grapes of Wrath has a very important legacy in American culture, and if you think about it, in world culture, because as you know, as I've told you many times, a not so irrelevant part of our culture and our way of thinking is influenced by American culture. So with this we end our discourse on The Grapes of Wrath. So I just thank you, and I'll See you next time.